This week, I'm delighted to share with you my conversation with Mattis Orgel. Mattis founded one of the UK's leading kitchen manufacturers and suppliers, and his journey to get there is nothing short of remarkable. So often we watch businesses from the outside, seeing the build, seeing the development, seeing the growth, but rarely do we understand the long and arduous path that it took to get there. Mattis doesn't shy away from sharing about his challenge with ADHD, how it helped form his vision for the business, but how it also set up tremendous obstacles that he had to learn to circumvent. We also recorded an extensive segment on how Orb Interiors is implementing incredible AI features into their softwares. Due to time constraints, we have cut this part, but perhaps we'll share it in the future. It's truly mind-blowing. Stick around to the end where you'll hear about financial policies when it comes to borrowing money to help fuel growth for business, and how refusing to rely on debt has helped carry the business through difficult times. There's plenty of gold dust here for many people in business, regardless of which industry you are in. I hope you enjoy. Mattis Orgel, thank you so much for taking the time to come in. Since we first met, I've always known you to be a doer. There's a certain buzz and energy around you, and this persona of there's something out there that's waiting for me, and now my job is to go out there and get it. Is this accurate? And if yes, tell me more about it.
I wouldn't really characterize myself fully as that kind of person. Generally, I think I am quite hyperactive. So I do always find myself doing stuff. I would say that most certainly with many of the things that I have done in life, worked in life, I never saw myself succeeding. Obviously, I'm nowhere. I'm not at any goal yet. For instance, the current company, Orb Interiors, I never saw this when I first launched succeeding to this level. I did at the beginning know that I'm working very, very hard. I always told myself if there's a gap in the market, I'm going to take advantage of this gap. I'm going to work hard and we're going to take over the world, that kind of thing. But I never saw how things exactly are going to fall in place. And I can say that many times I look back and I say, wow, this is actually crazy. So I think whilst it's true to say that I'm a hard worker and I generally like to achieve, I don't think I ever had a clear goalpost initially and I knew this is what I'm going to hit. I need to hit this by then. Yeah, sometimes I look back and I see, okay, not too bad so far.
Interesting. I think it was about 8 years ago that I sat at your kitchen table and we were discussing a job opportunity at Orb Interiors. And you were talking to me about the vision of the business and where it was going to be. And I don't think it was exactly in its infancy, but it was definitely still an emerging brand in its space. But there was, I remember, this fire in your eyes. Like there was this passion. You were selling me not something that you had on the table in front of us, but what was going to come. You were selling me the future. Take me back to that beginning in as much detail as possible. As where did this all begin?
I can't be sure if that was a detailed business plan, like if it's something that I had in mind and I knew exactly what's going to happen. Rather, I think it ties in a lot to a very common symptom of ADHD, really. I have been diagnosed with ADHD and I do generally get really excited about projects. I will work very, very hard to just make sure it achieves the best results that business can possibly achieve. I do like generally innovation. They say don't reinvent the wheel. Actually, I'm very into reinventing wheels. I don't like traditional business. I never like to be in the same line or doing the same thing as what's around already. Also to do with my personality. I just, it excites me. It's a challenge. So that's what I usually set out to do. Initially, I knew I wanted it to be different. I didn't really know exactly how yet, to be honest.
What was the gap that you talk about? You mentioned ADHD, and I don't want to gloss over that because we hear a lot about it, we read a lot about it, and I would love to tap into it. I've not really researched enough to ask educated questions, but I would like to understand a bit more. But before we get to that, and if I forget, please remind me to come back to it. But this gap that you mentioned, were you involved in joinery kitchens? How were you tapping into that gap in order to know that I need to do something and I'm going to do it better than what's been happening to date?
The gap actually I've seen initially when I first started this business was a totally different. My mind was, once I was in the business, I've noticed that actually there's a lot more opportunity because the gap is smaller, the hole is bigger. The more you have to fill, the more opportunity you have to be different and better. The initial gap was really very simple. I used to be in property management, and obviously it involves construction. And I've noticed an interesting thing. We had, in general, two types of kitchen companies. You could either get the Stacks, the Howdens, which were generally quite inferior quality. They're not very good, but they're quite cheap and cheerful. That worked for the landlords. Or you could get a high-end kitchen, quality kitchen. But the price is sometimes, it could be 5-10 times. So I remember thinking to myself at the time, I said, it is not possible that the cost of materials actually make up the difference in this margin. It can't be. To get, let's say, 18 mil MFC board versus a 14 mil, it can't be £10,000 in materials. So that was my very original premise to getting into this market. I decided, why not have a high quality kitchen, which is on par with 30, 40 grand, and I would sell it for £7,000, £6,000. How could we achieve that? And it should be achievable. with that in mind, I launched Orb Interiors. I decided that that's sort of a very good way to go. It seemed right to me as a business model. Once I did open Orb Interiors, I suddenly started noticing how far behind this industry is in general. And this industry is really very, very, very far behind. It's actually well documented as well. The furniture industry, especially in the UK, we're talking decades behind.
Where's that rooted?
It's generally rooted in companies, especially in the furniture manufacturing business. They see furniture as the core of the business. And they really don't realize that in today's day and age, a company needs to think about so much more than just the product that they produce. Producing a product is nice, but what should differentiate the manufacturer from a buyer shouldn't really be the fact that, oh, I have machinery and I can buy the boards and I make it. That's a good business model to go by. That's fine. But that worked once. If you want to really succeed in today's day and age, you've got to think about a lot more. So for instance, processes. If you have better processes, you'll be able to do a lot better. Obviously, in business, things are more organized. If you have better systems in place, software, then you can serve your customers better. Now, the difference between a furniture business and many other businesses, such as, let's say, service-based businesses, is not that furniture in general is so far behind beyond other businesses. It's just that with furniture, it makes a much bigger difference. For instance, let's say someone has a service business. It's going to be better for this business if they have very clearly defined processes. They'll be able to serve their customers better for sure. And it will make it a lot easier for them if they have good software. It will make it easier for them, for scheduling and all that. But it won't make as big a difference as it was to furniture. The reason to this discrepancy is furniture businesses, it's a very complex business, especially the manufacturing. You have a lot of things to consider. All the stuff going in, you got all the stuff going out. An average kitchen, and this is based on a statistic from Germany in 2019, an average kitchen will have 11,000 parts. So generally a major operation. Now, if you want to scale, you have to times that, and it becomes a major issue. Not only are there so many parts to look after and make sure that everything arrives on time and on schedule as promised, furniture has many other inherent issues. Since it's manufacturing, what happens if you didn't get one cabinet right? What happens if you didn't pack it right and then it got damaged? The cost to remake one product, sometimes one door, can be 10 times the cost of the door. If you consider you have to stop a machine for one, today you're working on green doors, let's say, to simplify things. You've got 10,000 green doors you need to manufacture. But yesterday you delivered red doors to another customer, and that customer, one door was damaged, was reported damaged on site. So you now have to create one red door in the middle of your green door shift. So essentially you have to stop the machines. You have to recalibrate them for the new board. You have to also get in a new board, which means you're going to have to get in a massive board, 3 by 3 meters, let's say, for one small door. Sometimes you have to get edging. We're talking 100 meter worth of edging just for this one tiny door. And you have to recalibrate the machines. You have to put in the correct edging. Essentially, it could take you 3 hours, in which time you could have, let's say, made 400 doors or 300 doors. So people don't realize that, and businesses don't realize that. So the cost of remakes in this industry is massive, like it's crazy. So it becomes a lot more vital in this industry to be extremely lean and extremely on top of things, which is why the furniture industry will be impacted a lot more by not having those things. So this is something I've really only noticed once I was in the business, and I noticed how much we can achieve with efficiency and software. And that's what we've been really doing ever since, to the point that I could almost say we're more of a tech company today than a kitchen business.
That's crazy. So a complete refocus. The gap you noticed then was half as big as the gap you noticed once you got your feet wet.
The more I started realizing what's happening in the marketplace, the more excited I got, the more riled up I got. I was
because that's where you thrive. You thrived in that solution, problem solving
and doing something different. I love doing something different.
Right.
I don't like I'm not so bothered with money, for instance, although obviously I want to be able to live comfortably, but I do want to innovate.
Do you see your future as a kitchen production company, or do you see your future as groundbreaking technology within the kitchen industry for the broader public? You're writing a new script for how this industry operates.
Very, very good question, actually. Originally, I was obviously doing it just for the kitchen industry, and I'm still doing it just for the kitchen. Like, can I say kitchen industry, rather my kitchen business? And that's what I was focused on. I always say to the team, and they all know it, we haven't launched yet. That's the official slogan. We always say this in the office. We haven't really launched yet.
How do they react to that?
I think they believe it. I think they understand where I'm coming from. They originally, it took time for them to be fully on board, mainly because those things, they don't come easy, especially on the staff. My business are my staff. I accredit everything to them. They are the ones who actually run the day to day. And it puts a great amount of strain on them, with constant changes. I think we recently discussed it in the office a couple of months ago. We came to the conclusion that in the 9 years of business, there's never been 1 week without a major change to something. So it could be either a new implementation of a piece of software or a new process, change of that kind of thing. There's always changes. The problem is I'm not the best communicator. I sometimes get fed up with, doing the mundane day to day. So I sometimes just implement things without really
sending out the memo.
Sending a memo, and then they would come to it would be incredibly difficult for them because, especially now where our software is totally built in with a business. It's like there's a lot of AI with the systems that we've got, and this is sort of the system now runs the business more than anyone. Like It's the system runs 90% of the business right now. So if I implement a change to that system, then suddenly, the people who are there working, they come in and they're like, what is happening? Like, I can't actually do what what I wanted to do on behalf of this customer because the system says, oh no, you need to do this before. What? That's one part of the difficulty. It's many other things. It also means that sometimes I'm there driving them mad. I would sometimes sit down with them could sit down for 6 hours. Like obviously they have to take phone calls in the middle, but I would and just discuss a process, one simple silly process, which sounds silly, but to me it's not because
you
it's
see
part
the
of the
future,
bigger.
how that's going to change. A small needle moving now how it can shift the broader picture later on.
Exactly. It's not always about the future even. It's even about the current. Like if you have a very, very expensive car and everything is good about it, but it's missing a steering wheel, let's say, then you can't drive, or it's missing the seat, Obviously, this is it's not an exact example, but the way I see it is I'm generally very little OCD even about this kind of thing. I don't know if I have OCD. I don't think I have OCD. Maybe I do. I don't know.
Undiagnosed.
But undiagnosed. I don't think I have, but maybe I do. I'm very detail oriented in this kind of thing generally. So I need it to be just so. So to me, if we're missing this tiny process, then we almost have nothing. Like, no, it's not. It just doesn't work. So I would go discuss every scenario, and I'd need to understand, and we'll have to make a decision together on a certain process, and they would go absolutely mad, and I can't blame them. But I think that's changed today, because I think today they've noticed what actually those small changes and gradual changes, what it's done to the business. So I think they've come to appreciate the impact, and obviously they had a big part in this, in all this innovation. They have a massive part in it. Yeah,
that's incredible. You're teaching them how to be visionaries. A lot of times employees are people who just love that routine. They love that stability. They love coming in 9 o'clock, knowing exactly what I'm going to get done today. 5 o'clock I'm going home. There's a certain routine, and that works for a lot of people. But you're the complete opposite. Your mind is running and your ideas are coming in, and you want to see these things being implemented, and your team of people who love that structure are then left to task to go and take those visions and those dreams and those ideas and rework their workflow to make it happen. So there must be this, you said they go mad sometimes, but I suppose that's the friction in hindsight. Once it's all done, they can see, wow, like we're on a whole different level now. How much of that do you think is down to your ADHD? You mentioned that. So let's just touch on that very quickly. This idea of constantly seeing new ideas, thinking of new solutions, and being very driven to make them actually happen. Is that part of ADHD? Did ADHD begin in your life as an issue that you had to figure out how to work it in your favor? Like, talk to me a bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So how much of this can I contribute to ADHD? Sadly, I've got to give it the 100%. I can't attribute anything to my personality, I think. I mean, obviously ADHD is my personality, but I think that kind of drive is fully attributed to my ADHD. It drives me to work really, really hard. It gives me this excitement. I'm like really excited about things. With regards to your question, was I always on good terms with my ADHD, so to say? No, actually, it really held me back early in my business life. In my personal life, you could say it has its positives and its negatives. Maybe, when I grew up in, especially being in Haida Yeshiva, comes with certain difficulties, but I think it gives you some life. And I think all in all, it was really a net positive to me. I feel very lucky with my life. I feel like I've had a good life and I have a good life. So it's good. When it came to business, actually, it was a major, major struggle. I couldn't focus the way I wanted to. And I've noticed the same pattern of growing a business, making it sort of successful or working hard, until it had the chance to become. And then I would just drop it because I got bored. And that was a big problem for me. I didn't know what it was. Even with Orb Interiors initially, I had this massive dream and I really wanted to become number one in the world. But I was so bad at running a business. It was actually sad, if not funny. I was talking about taking over the world and being the biggest kitchen manufacturer. And whilst I was busy talking about taking over the world, I was not very much delivering kitchens. Sometimes customers would order a kitchen and 40% of it would arrive. 60% would not have been ordered at that point even, because I was so behind with things. And don't get me wrong, I tried. I worked very, very hard. I just couldn't get things done. Like sometimes initially in those days, I couldn't figure it out, but I just wasn't organized, and I tried my best to just work. But I found myself working just on the future, not on the present. I find myself in those days, I could sometimes sit on the couch, work on on my laptop, doing things. I would sometimes literally fall asleep on the couch at 3 a.m., wake up 3-4 hours later, get changed, and continue working. It was that crazy. And I didn't feel like I was getting anything done.
Running
it was incredibly sad. Yeah. That was actually one of the toughest periods of my life. I really didn't know what to do with myself. I thought maybe I'm not supposed to be in business. I'm not allowed to. I was really considering. I remember actually telling my wife at the time. I said maybe I just need to go into a simple service-based business like painting. I actually thought maybe at the end of the day, I didn't bring a penny home. And I put all the money from other things that I had into this business, and the business was losing money. And I had this dream, and I couldn't give up on the dream. But I also wasn't in the present. I wasn't actually getting things done. So it was really very, very difficult.
How did it manifest itself? You came to your computer in the morning saying, I want to do X, Y, Z. I need to get this job done today. What happened? Like, how does ADHD play itself into your life to stop what has to happen from happening?
I think it's one of the things with ADHD. I mean, it's one of the big ones. Obviously, it's ADHD, it's attention deficit, right? That's in the name. You may have all the willpower in the world to do something. I'm not saying that everyone with ADHD has this, and I'm not saying that, maybe I was also lazy. I don't think I was, but, I think it was fully on ADHD. I just found myself doing other things. I couldn't really help it. I would sit down and say, okay, I have to do this for the customer. But I had this amazing thing, which is called, I'll do it later. This was like a very strong motto of mine, and I lived with it day and night. I'll do it later. And I always said, I'll do it later. And the thing is that it became so heavy on me that I always reverted to I do it later, because I didn't know how to face it. I didn't know how to face it. It became such a monumental task, like to look after all this tiny details. This customer's missing this and this customer's missing that. It became such a difficult thing for me. I found myself just not getting those things done. So I just reverted back to doing other things. So I remember at the time it was a lot smaller things, but thinking, okay, is there a way to design kitchens faster? So I would sit down and think for like 2 hours and say, how can we, is there a method in which what's the best way of designing a kitchen? So I would take a kitchen and design it 4 times, the same design. Just I would say, I start with this way and start with that way. It's the very small minor things. I would find myself doing that the whole time, or selling the time I just sold. I was the sole employee in this business. So that makes me the salesperson too. I just couldn't control my own brain. I couldn't, as much as I tried. I even went for therapy at the time. I didn't know I had ADHD. I didn't know what it was, and I tried. I was very hard on myself. I went to therapy. I remember telling the therapist, I'm not in control of my brain. I can't help it. Like, what can I do? I need to be put in place, really.
It's this double-edged sword, isn't it? Because it's what's fueling you and giving you these dreams and these visions. And you're talking about taking over the world, and people around you probably think this guy's crazy. He can't get a kitchen door to me, and he's talking about doing something so big. So the ADHD is propelling you into the future with these aspirations, but at the same time, it's just telling you, don't go and do what I'm telling you you're going to be doing in the future. One and the same diagnosis is really your biggest blessing and your biggest curse.
Yeah, at the time it was, I think it's one of those things, they say knowledge is half the cure. I think ADHD, it really depends on what environment. ADHD, for instance, in many environments will never bother you. Someone who's in Chayda all day, or yeshiva, or in business, ADHD can really bother them. But if they are working now on the outreach, let's say, that kind of thing, or labor intensive jobs, out and about, flying a jet, a pilot, life is good. Right. I mean, I don't think they'll ever notice how they are even, how this actually is in the way.
Fascinating. Let's briefly go through that moment of when you realized what it was and how you got yourself back on track.
So there were 2 major moments in this development. The first, I would say, was actually the fact that I spoke to 2 people about this, and they had a major impact. One of them was my brother, and this is the major impact on me. So I remember telling him, we sat down in a restaurant in Edgware, and I said, I'm not designed for business. I think I'm not allowed to run a business. I'm letting people down. I really should resign, and I should just not run a business. I think, I was at the wit's end at the time. I was really at the wit's end. Like, I just didn't know what to do. So he asked me then, okay, explain why, what are you doing? So I explained to him how I'm not getting things done, how I've got purchase order, there's a sales order from a customer. I need to place purchase orders and I just wasn't getting the sales orders through, etc., etc. And he said to me then, at the time, we didn't discuss the ADHD part. He just told me this. It was like a very short conversation. It was like maybe half an hour. So he just said this. He said, listen, Mattis, it's not that you don't care, because I was thinking, I just don't care. I don't have that ability. I don't care about the customers. I don't know why. It's just, it's not getting done. He said, no, I don't think it's that. He said, I think you are a perfectionist. You are like crazy a perfectionist, and you need to get everything just right. The problem is that you don't have the time to get things just right, and therefore you just don't get it done. You can't do it 90%. And it was a shock to me. Suddenly I could look at myself and also have some sort of appreciation for myself. It wasn't just vilification. It was like, is this possible? Is it actually possible that this is actually who I am? And it makes, the more I thought about this, I saw it makes sense. Even looking at my purchase orders, for someone who's disorganized, I looked at all the purchase orders I sent. Those were incredibly detailed, like incredibly professional. Everything was like, I can say as someone who now, obviously I've been in this business now for 9 years, like the purchase orders that I sent through at the time, they were so detailed and everything was so like, I would never send a list on email. It would always be like a table with a header. And, everything had to be the same. It was always consistent. Everything had to be perfect. But that meant I didn't get most of the things done. Or not most, but a lot, about 40% of my tasks done on time. So that was the first turning point. And he actually told me at the time, he said, Mattis, you don't need to leave business. You have the ability. And this is actually a good trait. You just need the correct setup and give it time. I went away from that meeting with feeling quite a bit better. There was also another person who we didn't discuss in depth, was a good friend of mine. And I was thinking one day of shutting. He just told me, you're not doing it. He said, you're not doing it. Okay, fine. I listened. Okay. we're not doing it now. This was sort of one of the two major turning points. But I would say the biggest turning point actually, physically in my life, in business related, was my first successful hire. I had a few other people involved in the business beforehand, either as potential hires or as potential partners. I was looking into all sorts. That hasn't worked out. Not due to a shortcoming with them. They were incredibly good. It was really me. It was difficult for me to get things done. So they would make a list, let's say, and they'd say, okay, those things have to get done. I wouldn't do it, so they would get upset or, stuff like that. It was just not designed in the right way. And I think mostly the partner part wasn't, because a partner expects you to do what's required today. So they were potential partners. They didn't feel like they have a partner, really, a functional partner in me. Then I had a really good hire, which was successful. I don't know why, but he put up with my craziness, really. He just did what was needed. So he was there as a PA / a salesperson / whatever you need to do. He just made sure that things get done. Came to the point where, for instance, he wouldn't let me anymore talk on the phone to customers myself. He created a rule. He said, every time you're on the phone, I need to be there, because you promise things and then you forget them. So
he's like an organized version of you.
He was, I think he had
the
organization.
He
was the current, whilst I was busy in the future, which wasn't really beneficial at that point because there was not much of a future to think about, really. But he was really busy with the present. He sort of made sure that things actually get done. So that was the major turning point for me. I got my next hire and then my next. And then, from there it was...
Amazing. What a story. I want to know from you, I'd love to, I can probably talk with you for 2 hours just on that topic alone, but I've got so much to cover with you. Your appetite for risk. What does the word risk mean to you and how do you relate to it?
I don't generally think of risk per se, day to day. It's barely in my vocabulary, really. Not that I don't take risks, I just don't think about them. For me, it's either make it or break it. That's just how it is. It either has to be perfect or nothing. Thinking back and thinking even currently, I am a very, very big risk taker. That's just how I am. You could almost say that I'm addicted to risk, but it's not true. I don't think I'm addicted to risk. I am addicted to change and I'm addicted to improvement. I really am. I really want to do something different. And this will inevitably come with major risk because you don't have data always to fall back on. You're trying to do something different. And if you keep relentlessly changing things, it's very volatile for a business. But that's just how I am. Risk is not something I think about even.
The way you've answered that, you've invested heavily in your product and you mentioned the software before, and that's come at considerable investment as well from your part. And you continue to invest and reinvest back into the business. Take me through the dialogue that plays through your mind when an opportunity comes to your table in front of you where either I can just settle with the current Or I can say, no, let me just try and see what's around the corner, what's hiding over the edge. What's that conversation, that dialogue look like in your mind?
So I think there are two different type of scenarios. And that actually brings us also back to the previous question. There are two types of risks. There are general day-to-day risks. For instance, let's do this investment in marketing, let's say. Or let's do this, that kind of thing, or in a sales team. Those kind of risks is something that I do always consider, and I'm generally quite conservative with it because I don't know the return on investment, which is actually, I don't know if it's right, but that's how I am. I'm very conservative with this kind of thing. I sort of need to know my return on investment before taking on something. It's very different when it comes to my core business. And what I mean by core business is somehow in my brain, there's a very big difference between sales and the business. A business needs sales to survive, but I'm less bothered with survival. I am more bothered with the business in general. So if it's one or the other, I'd have to take the business. So for instance, when it comes to software investment, currently we've invested over £700,000 into our internal ERP and MRP softwares and CRM. We've invested a ton, way, way, way above target with other companies the same size as ours. It's not a safe investment, but it's at least I know there's a return on investment because I know that those things have a very high chance of improving operations, streamlining processes, which are the end goal for this business. So that's part of the core business for me, and that's part of like make it or break it. It's one of the two. Then there is the investment into external like sales, etc., which I'm less bothered with generally. I really should be more bothered with it. It's something that I'm missing actually. I would say that I make sure to pay my bills on time. In general, I think this is different to many other businesses. So far, thankfully, I can say that I've never actually missed a bill in Auburn Interiors. We've never actually missed a bill, and that includes wages. Sometimes I had to put together money, lend money, especially in early years. In those days, I had to put the money together. Sometimes it was quite stressful, but it's always stressful really. But the one major thing is generally like no one has to chase us. We have an account with the raw material suppliers, etc., or with the service providers. We always pay on time. So I think I do take stress from that. Like I make sure that it's thing, and I think it's helped me. For instance, taking out massive loans. I would never pay out, like for instance, all this investment into software. It's not loans. It's not financed by a bank. It's something that the business has financed from its own cash.
It's incredible.
Which also comes at a major risk because we're not cash rich because of it. And I don't even know if it's because of it, but
it's amazing that your risk appetite is far greater for things that pertain to the business infrastructure than they do for the short-term immediate effect on the business. And this goes back to what you were saying earlier, that your entire relationship with the business initially was always, where's this going to be 20 years from now? What mark am I going to make on this industry 20 years from now? And it was the small stuff that you struggled with. And that's really, although you've managed to turn that around in terms of your processes and your deliverables, but at your heart, there's still this clearly defined line drawn in the sand between what's the long-term vision and growth and the opportunity that the business in itself holds versus the stuff that I've got to do day to day to fuel it and make sure it actually gets to where it needs to get to.
Yeah, it's a very interesting observation. I've never thought about this like this, but I think you're right. It probably all ties into the same point about me thinking about the future and not being so grounded in the current, because that clearly isn't a strong feature of my. I wouldn't say that's a plus.
Right. But you've got the team around you now to support you on that.
Yeah, they do. They're amazing. The team around me, they support the day-to-day like this as if it was their own business. They're very devoted, and I'm very blessed to have a very good team. But still, processes that we have in place, I would say, are not always designed to only look after the current. So for instance, as an example, we have a very good satisfaction rate with customers. I mean, generally, the thing I'm very proud of is we have in the trade line a 100% satisfaction rate. And in the retail line, it's like also, I think it's 97%.
Wow.
And we do surveys, but we generally like to do them about twice a year. So we would call customers at random and we would put the data in. So let's say take a batch of 50 people, 50 customers, and we would just ask them out of 10 and to rate us. We just want to know. So we've got very high satisfaction rates with our customers. So we obviously look after this because this is part of the core business, and by having very good processes, customers are happy. It means we're very competitive, because we do things right, so we can actually retain more net margin with a smaller initial gross margin, etc. So that's one thing that we sort of generally are quite good at. But for instance, if there is a large customer, let's say a good customer and a large customer of ours, and you know how things are sometimes with larger customers, they decide not to pay on time. It's a bit common. So they have, let's say, end of following month account, and they will pay 10 days later. They'll pay 15 days later.
Routinely,
yeah. We would strictly enforce payment on time. We're in a way a little bit like a bank in that way. We wouldn't allow it. So we would send them an email. Hi, your account has been put on hold. Please, if you're not thinking, we're going to have to close your credit facility. And but not always easy to do that. Sometimes I have to say, if it's general, like any normal customer, then Jacob, who's in charge of accounts, he would just send out the email and finished. He wouldn't ask me. But sometimes, it happened when it was a very good big customer of ours. Jacob would come to me and say, "Listen, Mattis, this has been happening. I'm just letting you know. I'm sending the email." Yeah, and I'd be like, "Send it." But actually, and I would say it with this big smile and confidence. But in reality, inside, I'm actually really, really dreading it. I'm like not looking forward because inside I'm really scared. I'm concerned. I'm like, is the customer going to drop us over this? And I don't want the customer to drop us. But I know that even if the customer does drop us, so be it. If they're paying 10 days late, even if I know that I'm going to get the payment, it's just the business comes before sales. I really strictly enforce it. And it goes both ways. Business comes first, which means that we're going to aggressively make sure that the customer gets his full service and everything comes on time and nothing is missing. But it also means, obviously, that at the back end, customers have to follow our process and our rules. And if they can't, we'd rather not have them. As sad as it is, and it's painful, This is just how we are.
Where did that confidence come from?
I still don't have that confidence.
But you do it.
I do it because I know that this is a principle I cannot compromise on. This is how I am, and this is just how it is. I always think the business has to be perfect. The way I like to think of it is, I don't see myself as being the owner of the business. I see it rather as sort of me being employed at the business. So the business is its own entity. When I think about it this way, then you can only have really one process, and the process belongs to the business and you have to follow it. I have no power to deviate from that process on behalf of the business because the business, frankly, doesn't ask me. Like, it doesn't consult it. Like, once it's set, I have no right and I have no power to overwrite it unless I overwrite it once. If I overwrite it going forward, and that becomes part of the business. But I'm employed there, and as such, the business is its own entity, and I have to follow it strictly. That's the way I see it.
Unbelievable. It's such value to hear that from anyone who's running a business, to understand how you relate to your own business, even though it's yours. But it's a standalone, and those processes are ultimately what lets you build, grow, and deliver an incredible service to your customers. What would you say the hardest thing about running and building a business is?
I would say cash flow by far. Just simple, old-fashioned cash flow. It's easy to work on your dreams, and especially when I've got such an incredible team around me, it's very easy to sort of work on the dreams, etc. But I also need to pay the bills, and that is always something that stays at the back of the head. It's sort of like a constant stress which is there. There are obviously times in which I'm less stressed and times in which I'm more stressed, but the general constant factor is it's generally stressful. You've got a big mouth to feed. This business is a monster. Like it's very thirsty and very hungry. It's relentless. It doesn't give up. It doesn't care. It's not emotional, and it needs to be paid. The thing is, whilst this is a constant, the expenses are always a constant, income is not. I can't, we don't have slavery anymore. So I can't force people to buy, on demand. So whilst I still have the constant outgoings, I can never be 100% confident that I'm going to have the income. So it's always something that I am, at the back of my head, I'm always worrying. I'm like, who tells me that I'm going to have this? Right now, we're busy. It's very nice. But what guarantees I'm going to have this 2 months down the line, 3 months down the line? How can I be sure? And especially times like now, where we've got this lovely Labour government who love businesses very, very much. It's not an easy time. The economy, I don't know what's happening. It's certainly not looking overly bright. So this is something that, as a business owner, I have to live with. I can never be sure about tomorrow.
Fascinating. You've mentioned this before about living on the edge and how you love that uncertainty and you love that fear factor. You enjoy knowing there's something left unknown around the corner and we're on this path to go and find it. What would you tell somebody who is the polar opposite? Somebody who loves routine, loves knowing exactly what's going to happen next. If you could sell them the other side of the coin, what would you tell them?
So I think on that front, I'm not sure it's something worth selling, to be honest. It's, for instance, for me, I thrive on, I would say, almost stress. I thrive on it. It's not like I'm looking for stress, but I get so much done and I feel good about it afterwards. So it gives me purpose, it gives me meaning. And, that's what gives me life. Would I tell anyone who doesn't like that kind of life that, they should, would I convince someone that they should have this life? To what ends? Why should he do it? Like, if they can be, the thing is also that it's in many cases really correlated. So the people who have less of this desire for stress or for uncertainty. Yeah. The people who have less desire for it are generally also more organized in the day-to-day life. They're generally, more settled, and they're better at many things than the other more messier people, that are prepared to take risks. And so I think those people generally are very good at the day-to-day. So they could be in good positions within businesses that provide that, and they could be happy. There's also something we should look at, which is the correlation between people who have less of this constant desire for risk and stress. They would usually also be the type of people that don't have the desire to take over the world. They don't need that kind of life. They don't need to either build a £1 billion business, or they don't have the desire to be the first to innovate. They want to live a happy life. So for them, happiness is actually not going out of their comfort zone and doing things and really inspire them to really push it and push boundaries and stuff. But what's the end point? What's the end result? What's the goal? At the end of the day, you want them to be happy, and this is for them. The exception to the rule, obviously, is the people who don't want to take risk, but they really have that desire to, yes, be extremely successful. They have that desire, which is not always, the case. In many cases, it's just not how it is. But there are certain people that have a little bit of both. And for them, I could say that life sometimes is really difficult. And it's a sad life for people like that. It's not a very, I would say, I was going to say it's not a happy life, but it's not true. I mean, they could be very happy, but it's still, they have a difficulty.
With two emotions. They're playing with two emotions.
They're playing with two emotions, and then those emotions are contradictory. What I would say is, instead of pushing them to go out of their comfort zone and push boundaries and take risks, what I would rather do, tackle this differently. I would say, okay, you've got two opposing emotions. Which one are you prepared to give up on? Okay, so this is the first step. You've got to really decide, do you want to have a really stressful life? Are you prepared to give up all that, comfort and the potential for failure? Like, it's a very, very high chance of failure in the entrepreneurial world. It's a very, very high chance of failure. What differentiates a good entrepreneur from a bad entrepreneur is how many times are they prepared to try? It's almost certain that people that they're going to fail. How many times are you prepared to just do it all over again? They have to have the understanding and the knowledge of how things are, and then make a decision which of those two opposing emotions they're prepared to drop, and they have to remain committed to the other emotion, which they keep. Sometimes they can change their mind after 5 years. If they decide to actually drop it, it's our job to try and motivate them. And however, like, as a good friend, this is our job. We try to motivate people to do whatever they want to do. We want to be in a position to say, listen, those people are inevitably going to go through stressful periods and stuff, and they're going to be upset and they're going to be let down with themselves, etc., etc. And this is our job then to tell them, listen, you decided this is the thing for you. Just do it. You're doing great. You've got to continue. You don't have a choice. One thing that we're seeing here so far in this conversation is that every venue has its plus and its minus. Sadly, in this world, there isn't just a plus. Right. If it's ADHD, it has a massive plus and a massive minus. Yeah. The people who don't have ADHD, then they also have a plus and a minus. The minus generally would be that they wouldn't be billionaires, let's say. Right. So it's not always a minus to them, but it's just sometimes to people around them who may, want it. They don't have the same exciting life sometimes down the line. But again, it doesn't always mean that it's a thing. But it is, the very basic level, you could call it a minus, although I don't think it is much of a minus. But then obviously you've got the people with opposing emotions, and this is a massive plus or minus.
Is there anything you fear? Anything about yourself that scares you?
Failure, absolutely. I'm still very scared of failure in business. If I fail now, after all those years in investment and everything that I've put in, it's going to be a big blow. But beyond the emotional blow, it will likely be it's just I've got a family as well. I've also got employees. Those are people that I'm committed to right now. Really can't afford to fail. The thing is, I don't have any securities. Thankfully, we don't have that. We don't, as a company, I don't like that. So thankfully, this is something that I was sort of more from personal, not so much from businesses. I just don't like to take big loans and stuff like this. And I know that I'm taking risks as well. I can't stop it. I would say we were obviously in a much better situation where we were 8 years ago, 7 years ago. We were a stable business. But again, the fact that I don't have any guarantees is always something that's on my mind.
Fascinating. Competition, does that fear you? Does that scare you at all?
No.
Why?
I think that by working relentlessly, Elon Musk once said, and I'm nothing like him, but I like it. I like the guy. When someone once asked him about competition, he said, well, quite simple. He said, if I'm putting in 80 hours a week plus, and they're putting in 36 hours a week, the CEOs in the other companies, or some of them 20 if it's a very large company, do the math. Like statistically, at least. Obviously, you could say, okay, maybe the other person's clever, but statistically, at least, if you just take there's an average IQ. Let's say everyone is the same. It's an average. So if one puts in a lot more hours than the other one, then, statistically, they're going to be better off. For me, I very much believe in open market. It's interesting. Like, I don't mind like someone going to competition. Sometimes we have customers who say, oh, yeah, sorry, I went elsewhere. I know this person, but I really don't mind. Like, it's okay. I don't know if people believe me when I say that, but I really don't. I believe in, in the open market, people have got to do what they got to do. I want my business to succeed based on merit. Not based on anything else. I just relentlessly work on innovation. On the contrary, if there'd be no competition, then what's the point in the game? It's to me, it's like almost like a game. It's a challenge. You've got to wake up and see how you can be different, and you want to differentiate yourself. Happens to be, I personally believe that right now we're probably at least 10 years ahead of the market in terms of IT implementation and processes. Maybe I'm overconfident, but that's what I think.
The goal at this point would be not to take your eye off the goal and to keep your finger on the pulse as to what's going on around you, and to making sure you keep that distance and time between.
Exactly. I keep benchmarking the whole time, which is something we do. We like to look at gross margins, net margins, and stuff like this. I like to sort of generally just look at those figures and understand how, what's the growth projection, or what's this and what's that. So it gives me a good idea of where we are in the marketplace. And I believe that if I just keep it going, then we should be okay. Even if I'm not the best, which I believe we are. I can't help but say that. But even if we're not, then, we're certainly very, very good at what we do. I think that the difference between this and business in general, like, I can't know that next 2 months down the line, the economy is going to be good enough. I don't know that we're good, but if the economy is going to be bad, it's going to be bad across the board, including competition.
You're right.
I think the difference between one business succeeding and the other can be attributed to the work that goes into running the business and to the processes. So this is, to me, a bit more of a grounded fact to work with, really. Right. External factors such as economy, you don't have any sort of data to predict with certainly what's going to happen. Right. I mean, in normal times, maybe yes, but certainly not in a recession, and certainly not with the government.
You never know what's coming next, so you don't want to bog yourself down by trying to tap into all of that information and trying to make something out of it before
I stopped doing that. I used to do that, and I've noticed that they're just contradictory. It's
fascinating. We get a lot of very positive feedback from a lot of listeners. They appreciate that we give airtime during the conversation for guests to share behind the scenes, like a snapshot of their business, their processes, their services, and just the industry in general. Throw out the Orb Interior playbook for us.
In general, there are 3 markets currently that we service. We've got the retail market, which is direct to retail, smallest line. Then we have developers, naturally going to be a bit bigger than kitchen retailers buying one kitchen at a time. And the biggest part of our business is actually selling to kitchen retailers. Kitchen retailers are people who sell kitchens.
When did that happen, that third branch of the business?
When we started manufacturing, we started taking on things ourselves. We knew that we'd need that in order to maintain. Once you have a plant, machinery, even though it's not our own, we sort of rent out a plant with the machinery, but you have to keep the machinery, the people busy for the time that you've got it.
Having that branch of the business must put you at a tremendous advantage for the developing line as well, because you're obviously able to manufacture volume at better rates, sell out at competitive prices. 3 individual markets, but this must be like the overall structure to this. It must be quite interesting to see from the back end.
Yeah, it's true. It's really, every market is tremendously good for us. However, kitchen retailers is really what we focus on most. That's the way we focus most of our efforts. The kitchen retail business goes back to the previous discussion of where is the biggest hole that you can fill. So if you think of it from that aspect, you say, let's say there's 3 markets. Where are you most different to others? To us, obviously, talking about manufacturing, since manufacturing is the main struggle of the business, manufacturing is really difficult to maintain and to sort of be on top of. Since this is the core improvement that we have, right, in manufacturing, then we've got to look at the 3 markets and say, okay, we've obviously improved a lot on manufacturing. Which of the 3 lines have most of the manufacturing part to it and least of the service part of it? So although we're doing incredibly well on the service part with the investment into software and stuff, I would say the service part is the smaller part. The manufacturing is the major grind. It's the major difficulty to get things right. That's where thousands of hours of logic have gone in, processes and into the systems. Happens to be that kitchen retailers, they mostly fall back just on the manufacturing. They don't need designs for kitchens. They don't need much service.
That's what they're doing for their customers.
That's what they're doing, exactly.
Right. So so you're supplying your competitors essentially, unless these people are in completely different spaces.
No. We're supplying our competitors. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. I mean, they're generally cheaper than us when it comes to developers and stuff like that. Yeah. When it comes to retail, it's not always the case. Some are cheaper than us and some are more expensive. We've got some high street kitchen retailers that could sell a kitchen for £40,000 and we would sell it for 10. They would put their own brand on. So that's nothing to do with us, really.
Why do you still busy yourself with that direct to consumer market when you're 100 miles ahead when it comes to the big stuff?
I think we're still a young business and I take everything that I can get, really. It's not like we're like rich business, that we're still investing a lot. I'm still investing essentially all our profits back into the business. So we'll take what we can get, really.
Brilliant. Do you get goosebumps just looking back at where you were 9 years ago when you were sitting on the couch at 3 o'clock in the morning, wondering how to get the next sales order through the system and looking at what you've got on the table now in front of you?
Yeah, absolutely. It happens mostly when there are after certain milestones, really. Right. That's when it usually happens. I'm actually a pessimistic type of guy generally in terms of like where we should be, where we need to be, we need to do better. And I always want to just improve and do better. And so I don't give myself much time to celebrate. But absolutely, when I do sit down, I can't believe that we've come this far, really. Sometimes it's a bit of a shock, really.
Remarkable. I'm curious to know from you, your experience in managing money. You mentioned you don't like debt. You mentioned you don't like borrowing money to support your initiatives and the journey of Orb Interiors. And I know finances are very personal, both in business and personal finances. What tips can you share with us on how to best effectively manage our money?
So I think personally, and I can't say this as a fact, and I know that many would disagree. So I'm not saying this as a fact. I can just say that this is something that helped me personally. I just naturally am very conscious of others' money. So I won't borrow if I don't have a clear plan of action, if I don't know how I'm going to pay it back. And I generally just hate having someone else's money. And that includes banks, by the way. I just really hate loans. So for me, I think we could have probably grown a lot faster if I was to take on more loans and take on more debt to service growth. But it's just something personal to me. I'm not saying this is the right thing, but for me, I am very conscious of others' money and I don't like just for future growth. It helped me tremendously because it put a lot more strain on us as a business, really, because obviously that meant that we were tight on cash. So, for instance, like post-COVID recession, it was really very, very painful at the time. I was really very scared because we didn't have those piles of cash because we'd spent so many hundreds of thousands of pounds into the software. So there was those scary times. But looking back, it most likely helped us in a major, major way because when it comes to recessions and stuff like this, debt servicing is one of the biggest strain on a business.
Fascinating.
Because you essentially...
So it gives you that bandwidth for volatility when the market starts to do crazy stuff. You're not being tied down by some massive repayment every month.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
Exactly.
That is fascinating.
Exactly.
That's a real value for a business to live by because it's so quick. You can get a loan payout in minutes. Like cash is so accessible and they make it so enticing.
Yeah.
And businesses will just say, well, this is for the growth of the business. You're saying, no, there's like a real strong principle there that I'll earn what I can earn. I'll use that to fuel the growth and the growth is mine. I'm not owing it back to anybody else afterwards.
Correct. I'm not saying that this is the right thing in business.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure many business owners will say that's ridiculous.
But even to me, when I think about it, I can't say it's actually the right thing. It's absolutely helped me a lot.
So happy I asked that question. Brilliant. We'll let you go. Mattis, thank you so much for taking the time out of a busy Wednesday afternoon. Really appreciate it. And God bless. All the success should be your way and enjoy the journey.
Thank you very much. Same to you. It was a pleasure.